COVID-19 pandemic and resulting lockdown has impacted nearly every aspect of everyday life. I certainly didn't think I'd be spending this much time in my childhood bedroom. In Stories of the South Side, we hear from Hyde Park residents from all walks of life, students, couples, parents, community leaders, and how the pandemic has impacted their relationships with others. The Reverend Dr. Dean Charles struggled to keep in touch with people once everything went virtual, and was forced to reevaluate his communication methods with his congregation.
Having two people driven in a small space without really having the space to work and having to kind of suddenly turn things into offices was intense. It was great company, but it was still really intense because we both kind of live for our work, and then to bring that home, and 12 or 1300 square feet, and then combine all of that work intensity and then talk about work after work is over. I don't think I realized how much more stressful it was because of that. I think, it's hard to say, but my guess is that I probably would have been, at least as we were still figuring things out, my anxiety might have been higher at the very beginning. Um, Now that I kind of know what sort of know what we're dealing with, and I've been bracing for the worst for so long, um, I won't say that it feels normal, but now it's helpful to have the quiet. I can have it as quiet in here as I want. I don't have to interact with anyone. And so sometimes that's really helpful. Where it gets to be challenging is where usually when I officiate a funeral, I don't feel it as deeply if I've got someone around me afterwards. And I just officiated my first Zoom. It was a secular, beautifully done secular service um, by Zoom. And I really felt it deeply afterwards, in part because people were kind of hanging around and not saying anything. They weren't, you can't quite mingle in the same way. It needed to end, and it's like there were no hugs or anything. And so that was tough. And when we signed off, I immediately felt it because I was here alone, and I almost felt it on their behalf. Um, so usually when I have to do something like that, I'm not as worn out if I've got somebody around me that I'm close to afterwards. I don't necessarily talk about what happened, but uh, but it that's when I tend to feel it more.
Not only are Zoom funerals and other services more difficult, the Reverend Doctor has certainly missed bumping into people on campus and off campus. Because of the pandemic, he has been forced to reevaluate his connections and move to an online format.
Because of my role, if I bump into you in a line, let's say at the business school coffee shop, if I ask how people are doing, people tell me the truth. Or shall I say, they tell me the details. So, I mean, that's just the nature of my role, that people will just tell me the details anyway. So I feel like I'm missing a lot.
Mhm.
I feel like um, I always have a pervasive feeling of feeling like I'm not doing enough for people, no matter what I'm doing. But I feel it, I think, a bit more strongly now because I'm not bumping into people in the same way, and I truly miss it.
First year Jasper Coda saw his gap year as a band organizer cut short and found solace in the one constant in an ever changing situation his car, Zeke.
Yeah, so last September, I flew to Iowa to begin an internship with the Biden campaign. And I stayed with this man named Bruce for a week. Most wonderful, generous, sweetest man in the world, with an incredible dog named Ike, spelled Ayk. And yeah, Bruce took care of me for my first week while I was getting settled in before I moved into a different supporter housing. But Bruce was very much looking after me like my whole time in Iowa, like always checking in on me, making sure that I was doing well. after about a couple months, the campaign interviewed me for a field organizer position, and they said that they were going to hire me, but I did need to have a car because there was no way I was going to be able to organize without having a car. So having no idea where to even begin looking for a car in a place that I was still very much a stranger to, I reached out to Bruce because Bruce is just one of those guys that just like knows everyone and everything and can maneuver life very well. So I called up Bruce. I remember like exactly where I was. I was at like the library in Des Moines, which happens to be a very nice library. And I called Bruce and I was like, "Hey, Bruce, boss man, I need a car. How do I get a car?" And he was like, "Jasper, boss man, I got you. No worries." Basically, he hooked me up with what he like. For Bruce, it's like I got a buddy, and then he like has a buddy for everything. So Bruce was like, "Yeah, I have a buddy. He was my friend from elementary school, and he has a used car lot. So let me reach out to him, get back to you." So about a day later, Bruce calls me back, and he's like, "Hey, so my buddy, he's got this Ford Escape. It's a 2005 Ford Escape." And he says that it's a pretty good car. It's under 100,000 miles put on it, but he's willing to sell it to you for $3,000. And I was like, $3,000? It's like a heck of a deal, Bruce. And he was like, we look after our people here in Iowa. So I was like, right on, right on. So took a trip down to the used car lot to see the car and meet Bruce's friend. And he was super, super kind and very accommodating. He said that he had to get some work done on the car before he felt comfortable selling it to me, but then afterwards he was happy to. And so just kind of had to like put like duct tape around my windshield wiper, which is still the way it is. So the radio stopped working at one point. Zeke is a very, very, very battered car. And somehow he has taken me to California from Iowa, and then from California back to New York, and then from New York to Chicago without falling apart completely. But yeah, then made it home. It was very tough not being able to like hug my family right away because I hadn't seen them in so long. But obviously the pandemic was still is a very big concern. But stayed home for a while, and I think I described this to you when we talked. The hardest part about being home was that for so long, because I had a car and a job that required me to move so much, for so long, my life was constantly in motion. And then the pandemic hit, and for 4 months, I had to be completely still. And it was the complete opposite of the life I was living before the pandemic hit. And that sucked. And I really had no reason to take my car and go places. And in order to feel like something at the end of every day, I would take Zeke to this random spot next to this field just to watch the sunset every night. And I would just sit on top of my car. And it's funny, cars would like drive past me and like look at me, and I'm sure they were thinking, what's this kid doing sitting on top of a car in the most like random place to do that? But it just felt like the right thing to do. And that was sort of the only thing that was like exciting about each day for a very long time. But yeah, then I drove to Chicago, and now I'm here, and I'm here with Zeke, and I still take him out for drives every once in a while, and I still refer to him as if he were a human being. I'm aware that that's really weird, but I will continue to do it nonetheless. And yeah, I love my car, and I love that I love my car.